A few days ago, we did a video discussing the top 5 teams that I felt were in the best position to make the playoffs after missing out last season. Obviously, if those predictions were to come true, that means that 5 teams who made it last year would be at risk to miss this year. I'm going to discuss today those 5 teams I think are most in danger of missing the playoffs after being successful last year. We'll get into all that coming up next. So welcome back here to Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, today I'm going to tell you the top 5 teams that I feel are most at risk to miss the playoffs after making it last season. Now, some of these might come across as being a little bit controversial, so I do highly recommend you check out the entire video. Leave your comments down below. Keep in mind this is strictly an opinion based on a few things that I've kind of analyzed and considered, and I'll explain my rationale for each one. If you feel differently about these selections, and like I said, let me know down in the comments, and let me know which teams you think are most likely to miss the playoffs who made it last year. Of course, every year we see turnover year to year, teams missing one year, making it the next, and vice versa, and there's bound to be some turnover. But as I said in the other video, I do feel like there's a much more likelihood of the teams being different in the Eastern Conference than the West. A lot of the teams in the West who made it last year, I just don't see too many of them being different for the coming season. Obviously, if you look at the teams that I predicted who missed last year that I thought would make it this year, included the Arizona Coyotes in the Western Conference. I discussed the New York Rangers and the New Jersey Devils from the Metro in the East, and the Montreal Canadiens and Florida Panthers in the Atlantic Division in the Eastern Conference as well. Now let's talk about the teams that I feel they're going to replace. Now let's start in the West. Obviously, if Arizona makes it, there's only one other team that I feel right now is really in danger of dropping out of the playoff race, and unfortunately, that's the Winnipeg Jets. Now, of course, that very well could change, but based on today, as I record this video on September the 1st, there's just way too many question marks and changes in Winnipeg over the offseason that I don't have nearly as much confidence as I did in them in the last couple of years. Of course, last year I predicted them to be a strong contender to go all the way to the Stanley Cup final. That didn't happen, and right now, on paper at least, that team looks a lot weaker. Of course, they had to trade Jacob Trouba, so of course the blue line's a fair bit weaker. They also lost Sherratt and Myers to free agency. At this point, RFA forwards Kyle Connor and Patrick Laine remain unsigned. There's certainly question marks about Laine falling out of favor with some of the leaders on that team as well. So there's just way more questions than answers, and even though some of those answers might come between now and the start of the NHL season, I really just don't have a good vibe about the Jets, and I think we might see them take a major step backwards before they can take a major step forward. I do think sometime in the near future, they very well could be considered to be contenders. Again, they can rebuild that blue line, they can get some of these forward contracts in place and really secure that forward core for the next number of years. It would be a big help. They have a good goaltender, Connor Hellebuyck, locked up longer term as well, but there's just a lot of holes in that team that they haven't really been able to fill throughout this offseason. We haven't seen a whole heck of a lot out of Kevin Cheveldayoff, mostly because the RFAs remain unsigned. It just doesn't answer too many questions. Like I said, there's more questions than answers, and I just don't have a lot of faith in this group heading into the season as of today at least. Now, another team that many might feel is an obvious one, but for me, I'm not real big on the Columbus Blue Jackets heading into the coming season. So the Columbus Blue Jackets have had a mass exodus. They lost their longtime starting goaltender, Sergei Bobrovsky, to free agency. They lost forwards Artemi Panarin, Matt Duchene, and Ryan Dzingel to free agency as well. Of course, some other pieces that they picked up at the trade deadline, they opted not to re-sign and bring back. So this team really spent a lot of assets going all in and going for it last spring, and they obviously did not make it too far. They made it to the second round. They won their first ever playoff series in franchise history, which was a nice accomplishment, but was it really worth it to win one playoff series and give up all that assets and picks and everything to land those guys to really only win one round? To me, it wasn't. That was my opinion from the get-go. I still never saw them as Stanley Cup contenders after those moves, but you take away the goaltending, you take away all those forwards, and I just think they're really going to struggle. I mean, yes, they do have some good pieces left. Their blue line is still relatively intact. When you got guys like Jones and Werenski back there as your top pair, that certainly, you're in good shape. But at this point, Werenski still remains unsigned as well. So that's another question mark. Will he be there at the start of training camp? There's just way too many questions. I just don't have a lot of confidence that they're going to be able to score as much, given all the firepower that's left. In goaltending, I don't have a lot of confidence in Korpisalo as a starter right now, and I know their young prospect goaltender, Elvis Merzlikins, does look to have some potential, but he's never played an NHL game, so I just don't have a lot of confidence in them as a tandem yet. I don't think they're going to be able to score enough, and I just see Columbus really having a big-time slip in the standings for the coming year. Now, another team in the Metro Division, I think, has been slowly working its way down the standings, and I do think, unfortunately, will be at risk this year, and this one is not a given. I don't think there's a lot of other teams that could be intermixed here, but I think the Pittsburgh Penguins are going to be in danger of dropping out of the playoff race. I mean, technically, they've had back-to-back 100-point seasons after winning the Stanley Cup a few years ago, but really, if you look at the fact of where they finished in the division and the fact that their actual wins has been down, I know it's still really good results overall, but they have technically been dropping a little bit every year. You take a look at the changes they made this offseason, trading Phil Kessel, and even though they get some decent pieces in return, you got guys like Alex Galchenyuk that's new to the team, Dominic Cahoon. I'm not sure that they're overall really a whole lot better team. I mean, as much as Phil Kessel appeared to be difficult to work with, it might have been a pain in their neck at times, he put up a lot of points and provided a lot of things on the ice that they just can't replace. And at this point, I just don't have a ton of confidence in the players that are coming in to be able to provide that much or more. So I just don't see them getting better. And with the other teams in that division getting better, like the Devils, like the Rangers, even to a degree the Flyers as well. I see the Hurricanes being pretty strong still. See the Capitals being strong still. It's going to be a dogfight in that division. And I can just see the possibility that the Penguins could end up missing. Now, that doesn't mean they're going to have a bad year. I do have some concerns about Matt Murray as well, and I think the team does as well, which is why they haven't locked him up to a longer-term deal as of yet. So by no means is it a given that they will miss, but I do think they're going to be in a really competitive situation in that division, and I do think the odds are against them that we might finally see Crosby and the Penguins miss the playoffs for the first time in a very long time. Now, another team in the Metropolitan Division that I do feel is at risk to miss the playoffs after having a solid run last year is the New York Islanders. Now, one big thing for me is goaltending. Last year, they had terrific goaltending from Robin Lehner and Thomas Greiss. I don't have that same confidence in Semyon Varlamov. I think letting Robin Lehner go was a huge mistake. Even though Thomas Greiss performed really well, I'm not sure that he's going to be able to duplicate that, at least to the level that he did last year. I mean, the team in front of him, for the most part, is not drastically different. So I do see the possibility that they'll still be a very competitive team. And if they do miss the playoffs, I don't see it being by a ton. But if you go back a couple of years ago, this team has been offensively capable for the last number of years. Even after losing John Tavares, they were still very adequate in that area last year. But they also were very strong defensively, and provided by that strong goaltending by Lehner and Greiss, which was really the main reason why that team elevated into the position that they were. You take that out of the equation, and they very well could go back to being, a mediocre team who can score and can be in games, but when they need it most, can they get that big save? I'm just not confident that they're going to get that this year. So I do have a less confidence in the Islanders for the coming year than I did last year because of Leonard's departure. I think longer term, I understand the strategy. They brought in Semyon Varlamov, who has the same agent as Ilya Sorokin, their top Russian goalie prospect, who they're trying to bring over to play in North America from the KHL. They've had a hard time getting him to come over. They very well might be able to use the Varlamov influence, have an older Russian goaltender to mentor him. It makes sense from that perspective, but short term, I'm just not sure they're going to be able to keep up here, and that Varlamov is going to be able to get them the same results that they got from Robin Lehner last year. Now, last but not least here, if you take a look at some of the teams that I predicted to make it into the playoffs that missed last year, a couple of them were Atlantic Division teams, including Montreal and Florida. And if you take a look at the other teams in that division, obviously I don't see teams like Tampa or Toronto missing. So really the only other playoff team is the Boston Bruins. And even though it's hard to bet against the Bruins, they've been so good for so long, and that core has been so solid. You just can't help but wonder here, they're another year older. Can Bergeron and Chara keep it up? We saw Chara get really banged around hard in the playoffs last year, had a broken jaw. You got Brad Marchand, Patrice Bergeron are still really solid hockey players. David Pastrnak is clearly the future of that team. They certainly have some question marks heading into the season. They still have some RFAs like McAvoy and Carlo unsigned. Blue line has a lot of question marks on it between injuries and players not signed or not even in a training camp yet. Of course, we assume right now that Chara will be back ready to go for the start of the year, but he's another year older, and even though he still provides a lot of leadership and can certainly contribute, he's not the player he used to be, in my opinion. You take a look up front, David Krejci had a really nice year last year. Can he duplicate that? I'm just not sure. I mean, you still got the Davis Backes contract in that situation as well. Overall, I think the Bruins will be a very good competitive team. But if you look at the other teams in the Atlantic Division, if you're going to see one or two other teams like Montreal and Florida step up and be able to rival those teams, I just think the Bruins might be a little bit more likely to fall down in the standings as opposed to Tampa or Toronto. And really, I would not be shocked if I end up being wrong on this one. Really, the Bruins are a tough team to bet against. They're well coached in Bruce Cassidy. They have some great leadership there. But it's just, for me, if you look at the teams that were in last year with the three of them, I just think that they might be the most likely out of the three to fall back for the coming season. But at the same time, like I said, it's hard to imagine the Bruins not being in the playoff picture. So I would not be shocked if this one ends up being wrong. But if I had to pick out of them, that would be my choice. So, of course, that's just my opinion based on everything that has gone on this offseason. But let me know what you think down below. If your opinions are different, that's totally fine. Let me know what you think in the comment section, and we can continue discussing it further. When you take a look at the Western Conference, though, I just don't see too many of the other teams missing out. I mean, you look at the Pacific Division, I just don't see teams like Calgary, Vegas, or San Jose falling back. In that Central Division, I think it's going to be a dogfight as well. And even though the Jets have a lot of question marks, so I think they're at risk, but other teams like the Dallas Stars, the Colorado Avalanche, the St. Louis Blues, the Stanley Cup champions, I just don't see them falling back. Even Nashville made some decent moves as well throughout the offseason. I think they're going to be pretty solid again. So we very well might see a case of 5 teams in the Central making it. Again, it is a possibility, but it very well, if this prediction holds true, will be an even split of 4-4 with the 3 Pacific Division teams I mentioned, with the Coyotes joining that group. So I do think that the turnover is going to be more likely to be more in the East. I think a lot of the Western teams that were playoff teams last year did enough to stay as good or get better compared to last year. So those are my thoughts. Of course, like I said, I want to know what yours are down in the comment section, and we can discuss further. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing and turning on your notifications so you don't miss any future videos. Give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it as well. I'd appreciate it if you did. As always, thank you for watching, and I will catch you next time.